from you. I was thinking about sending in my rescue crew. The time he said, really said it all. Saw you carrying some chicks back at the mall. Standing on line with the skinny jeans, looking like Ashton Kutcher in the movie scene. And you're crazy about it, and you can't live with.
Good morning and welcome to WNHH Radio's Dateline, New Haven. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our community tick. Sherry Quickmeyer makes our community tick by organizing people to try to make our government more open, accountable, and fair. She does that as the executive director of Common Cause Connecticut, and she's here to update us on that quest. Welcome to WNHH, Sherry. What a pleasure to have you in.
Thanks very much, Paul.
This is your first visit
to be
here, huh?
I think so.
I can't believe that. We've been on 4 years and no Sherry until
You've
now.
just been ignoring me. Yeah.
I guess, but now we can't, because in the state we are talking about how to get more people voting and how to build our democracy. And these are on the front burner, and you're on the front lines.
It's an active time, and we really do think that our democracy benefits with more people engaged.
Mm-hmm. So one thing, we're going to talk mostly about automatic voting registration, because that's something you're in the midst of and that has not been decided yet for this term.
No.
And we have less than a month to the legislature. When does it end?
Yes, it ends early June, first week.
Okay, so we got a month to go.
Right.
But there was passage of a bill that falls under your bailiwick somewhat yesterday in the state Senate. It's already passed state house. The governor said he's going to sign it, and that's early voting.
Yes.
So in New Haven, in Connecticut now, unless you vote absentee because you're going to be out of town or you're injured, I believe, you have to go to election. You have to vote on election day.
Yes,
but that might change
in our Constitution. How it is we vote and when. And we've proposed, this is the second time now that we've proposed to amend the state constitution to permit people to vote early. And the resolution that was proposed this time made it through the House of Representatives. It came out of committee, made it through the House of Representatives with a very healthy bipartisan.
Oh, so Republicans are okay with it?
Well, they were in the House. Last night, however, they weren't so much in the Senate. There was only one Republican who voted for it in the Senate. And so we did not get the requisite 75% of of legislators to vote for it, which would have put it on the 2020 ballot.
Oh, no, so it's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen in 2020, no.
Because I thought the governor sent a release yesterday saying, yeah, it's going to happen. We're going to have it by 2020. What was that about?
I'm not sure. I didn't see his release. And I thought I saw some of his people last night at the Senate. So they maybe just were excited that, in fact, it passed the Senate, because it did, but it did not pass with the 75%.
So that means, in fact, it didn't pass.
Well, in fact, it means that it won't be on the ballot in 2020, and we'll have to go back through again and repeat the process in the House and in the Senate.
So in other words, you have to start over.
Yeah.
So was there any significance that it passed?
I think so. I think it was certainly significant in the House, because there were so many folks who voted for it there, and it seemed to happen rather quickly, and there wasn't a tremendous amount of controversy.
Were you caught by surprise?
The numbers were a little stronger than I thought they were going to be. Last night, I was disappointed.
But were you expecting it?
You never know. When people tell you they're on board and they're going to vote for something, you kind of hang on to that.
So Republicans had told you they're going to vote for it, and they changed their mind.
Yeah.
What changed their mind?
I think I'm not entirely sure, because I haven't spoken with them yet, but there was a lot of controversy about whether or not we actually need to do something like this. Why are we passing something, or are we planning to pass something that's as vague as it is? It doesn't say exactly how many dates or how many, is it a week?
And you don't want to do that in a constitutional amendment because
Right.
you want flexibility for
Right.
changing times.
Right. And they will have the opportunity as elected officials to actually come up with the details.
So what do you think was underlying it? Here, I have two theories. One is that Republicans assume that early voting will mean more Democratic votes. That forever, the right or wrong, the assumption is that poor voters have a hard time getting the polls. They work more likely to work two jobs and have less flexibility and get there, or have transportation challenges. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the theory. And that there's also a philosophical concern that, on the one hand, people on your side say, we want more people to vote because that's democracy. We've got to break down the barriers and have more people have a say. And that a more conservative argument is that voting is a privilege and a right, but that you have to earn it and not just make it, not that you shouldn't make it too easy, but that you shouldn't. Maybe that's what they're saying. I don't know if it's not too easy or that, you should have it Sunday day when we all do it unless you have an excuse.
I think that definitely is a very workable theory, and people absolutely say that. And at the same time, every person who got up and spoke against the resolution or against any amendments that they tried to attach to it started off by saying, well, we think everyone should vote. Everyone should be able to vote, and we should be encouraging that. And then they would talk about how this isn't the way to do it. And that seemed, it just...
That's what makes me think it's more a strategic
Yeah.
issue, because nationally, as the debate rolls out, tell me, you follow this much more closely than I do. It seems to me nationally the way it rolls out is that Democrats think promoting more voting in more ways is going to help. They say it's going to vote the democracy, but it's also going to help the Democratic Party, and that the assumption, right or wrong, on Republicans is that it's going to promote more non-white voting, more poor people voting, and that even though Trump got a lot of poor votes, especially in Appalachia, where it's might not always, I don't know if it's easy to vote there, but that the assumption is that this is about which party's going to benefit.
Everyone has their theory or their hopes, and I think that I spoke with some, and I would never describe them as a competitor to your show, but there are Republican talk show people who claim that it's not even thinly veiled effort to get Democrats to vote more.
Mm-hmm.
So that is certainly something that is said, but I don't see that necessarily, and I think that we see that many more people are registering as unaffiliated rather than choosing one party
That's the
or
big
the other.
party in Connecticut.
So yeah. So I don't, and I think that early voting as well as election day registration, which the Republicans heartily opposed, is certainly something that anyone can use. It's an opportunity to figure out how it is you get your folks there to support you.
All right, and we're talking about building democracy, getting more people to vote here with Sherry Quickmeyer, Executive Director of Common Cause Connecticut here on Dateline, New Haven, WNHH-FM 103.5, live streamed at newhavenindependent.org. But you still got one issue very much alive, among others, this session.
It's true.
And that's automatic voter registration, where every time you go to the DMV to die and then get your license renewed and feel like you were born, or you go to social services and get some kind of public aid, that they would automatically register you as part of that process. How would that work? Is that, do you have to still sign something, or you have to opt out, or how would, like if I say I don't want to be registered?
The way it works right now is that we have a memorandum of understanding between the DMV and the Secretary of the State's office.
That's Department of Motor Vehicles.
Right. And that is basically how it works, although what they do is they ask if you would like to register to vote. And there's not a whole lot more detail than that. What we're proposing is that you be automatically registered, and not just at the DMV, but possibly if you go to sign up for Husky Healthcare, or if you go to register for classes at Gateway Community College, or some state college and university, some agency that interacts with the state in some way or other.
And would you opt out? Or are you being told
you would be
registered?
opt out? You would be able to opt out if you don't choose to be registered.
That's part of the idea here, Sherry Quickmeyer, that motor voter was a good law, got more people registered, where you have the option that you can, while you survive the DMV line. But that then skews the vote toward people who have cars.
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why we're asking for additional agencies or the opportunity to get more agencies on board when we codify this. And just having a memorandum of understanding or agreement between two state agencies is just not adequate in my opinion.
So how's it doing? Did it get out of committee?
It did get out of committee, and it is waiting to be called in the Senate. It's a Senate bill, and the champion of the bill, or the person who wrote it up in the first place, says that it's going to happen soon.
Who's that?
That would be State Senator Matt Lesser.
Oh, okay. We heard a lot about him in the last campaign,
Yes.
the final days with his opponent's literature. The Sherry, what's the prospects look like? What are Republicans saying? And you don't need 75% for this,
No,
right?
this is not. This is just a simple majority.
So the Democrats can deliver on this if they want.
I think they can if they want, and I'm optimistic that they will.
Have you heard of any Democratic opposition?
I haven't actually. I mean, there have been questions because it is something different, and there is the question of, don't we already have this? And when we explain that we're trying to make sure that folks can opt out rather than being opted in without the
And you're
opportunity.
talking about a wider net,
Yes.
so it's not just drivers.
Right.
Now, wouldn't that be the kind of issues Republicans said, again, the assumption, right or wrong, that poorer people and urban voters are more likely to be Democrat. They're going to likely not have a car. So doing this will help the Democrats. Have you heard any of that?
I haven't heard that yet, but it hasn't gone on the floor yet in either chamber. So I anticipate that will come up because it always comes up. But I think that the committee chairs in both the House and Senate are prepared for that, and they were really clear when they got it through the Government Administration and Elections Committee that was not an issue they were willing to entertain.
So, Sherry's the bigger question whether it's going to make it to a vote when there's this crush of bills at the end of a session that have to be priorities among votes they want, or is it going to be fighting off opposition?
I think that the first, is always a challenge.
So how do you do that? You've been there. How many years have you been at the Capitol for different jobs?
Too many years. Probably 15.
So do you know any tricks, or not tricks, but strategy when it's crunch time to get your bill over the line? How do you do it?
Well, you make sure that, folks who are in a position to call bills or to make the schedule are the ones, are prepared to make that a priority.
When they see you in the hall, I don't know if you position yourself by the men's and women's room or what. When
So they can't run away.
Yeah. Do they look at you and think, how many votes are at stake if I don't deliver for Sherry? Like,
Well-
how big a vote is Common Cause? How much are his issues? There's been a Senate progressive wing, especially in the
Mhm.
post-Trump era.
Mhm,
There are a host of issues associated with that.
mhm.
Like, what's at stake if Democrats don't deliver on broadening voting? Because voter suppression is a big issue nationally.
I think what's at stake for them isn't so much are the 7,500 Common Cause and Connecticut members going to go after them. I think what's at stake is the number of additional voters who they may have an opportunity to try to convince to vote for them. And that we expect, and there was polling done about this, that there are just over 250,000 eligible voters in the state of Connecticut who are not registered. And we think that's an enormous number, and we don't think that should be ignored.
All right. So now you said it did pass the Government Administrative and Election Committee,
Yes.
and you think that's an enormous number that should not be ignored.
Yes.
Now, part of that comes to Election Day registration. And we've had that for how many years now?
4, maybe?
That means if you're not registered, you can register and vote on the same day. And you've
Yes.
seen, I saw you there on Election Day this last year when it was a mess in New Haven, where it's always a mess, and we don't plan for it right. And people are waiting online for 4 hours, and there's a question whether they get there in time to vote. And one concern was about EDRs. Maybe we can help by having this advanced voter registration.
I think so. I do.
Although I noticed, and I don't know if this is accurate, this is anecdotal, most people I met were college students who just didn't get around to vote, or they got the wrong information from their schools. Is that going to change? Because they don't go to the motor vehicle usually. Some do, but most don't. And most don't go to social services. So will it really have an impact on EDR?
I think it should actually, because there's a longer period of time that will be better advertised, that folks should know that they can. I mean, I'm recommending 2 weeks of early voting,
Oh, okay.
but that's so you would have early voting opportunities, and then no less than 3 days of early voting, basically.
But now I'm almost talking about
But
advanced
but
registration. Would that
right.
help?
I think it will, and I'm optimistic that folks will have had the opportunity, and that hopefully the universities, local universities, will be
Yeah, we're
better
hoping that.
prepared
Yeah.
to provide that information to their students. And some of it is that there are students who apply for absentee ballots from their home towns and states. They don't get them on time, and then they come rushing down to register on election day, and they're kind of confused because they've never done it in New Haven. And I mean, you're right. I was there until the wee hours, and at the worst, people waited 7 hours
Yeah,
to
I know.
vote.
Yeah.
I mean, the best was 3 hours, I think, in the early afternoon. And people were told mistakenly that they were never going to get in to vote, so they should just leave.
Mhm.
And I
So you're
am
really committed. Why are you so committed that everyone get to vote? Why does it matter to you?
because I think that our democracy is in actually, I think it's in some peril right now. And I'm eager to see that more people are involved, and that more people have an opportunity to have their voices heard. And I think we're stronger as a nation, we're stronger as a state, if everyone has a chance to participate.
And how much do people participate?
I mean, in terms of how many people actually vote,
Yeah.
I think that wasn't the number here in New Haven in 2018 about almost 60%
Yeah, and I
of.
think it was the highest we've had in many
Yeah.
years. Yeah.
So I think that when there's an election that people feel passionately about, then they
Brantford has a
come
big, yeah,
out.
place towns like Brantford, it seems like everybody votes there.
Yes, I've heard that.
And
Uh,
so then, there've been a lot of, we've botched all of our elections for a whole variety of reasons in New Haven. A lot of it's about politics, but we've really not run it right. It takes days to get the results when the rest of the state has already weighed in. It's not just EDR.
no.
And I have one pet peeve that I always bring up to Denise Merrill. Only one, which is that because of gerrymandering, it makes no sense where people go to vote and how much staff we have to hire. One problem is it's hard to get people to work those 17 hours a day
Yes.
at the polls and to get enough crews. So in New Haven, we have 30 wards. But we have over 40 polling stations, especially on even number of years. And the reason that is the wards get chopped up because part of one ward will be one state legislative district and the other one will be another. They've carved it up. And like a lot. And then in other times, there'll be one state senate district and another. So you go to a place like Truman School in Ward 4. They sometimes they have to set 2 sets of polling places, 2 whole teams of people to work the polls. But you go an hour and only 2 people come. No one votes. And you go to Troop School. You have 2 separate polling districts for the same place. And it's hard to get all those people, and a lot of them don't do it right, and a lot of things go wrong. And it's a lot of money that could be spent running the elections better. And I'm even wondering why we can't even combine some of the ward votes. And then the same person votes at a different polling place on even and odd number of years because of that state legislative mess.
Yes.
But the legislature has to change that. Have you had that been on your radar at
No,
all?
I think it's confusing. And in fact, I've also spoken with the Secretary of the State about it. And I voted here in New Haven for most of my adult life. So
People go to the wrong place, and
They
the
do.
registrar votes
It's
says
very
them sometimes the
confusing.
wrong information about where to
Right.
go.
Right. And I think, I mean, you did make one point that we don't plan well here and in many other cities and towns. Planning isn't all that good. I think there are higher expectations now that folks have to get to the secretary's office, that how many people they expect they need to hire and how many people they anticipate. But it hasn't worked well, and New Haven in particular has not invested in enough staff to make it work better. And I think
I
that
remember when Ward 7, I remember someone didn't come in, he came in late, he was overslept, and he had people out the door and down the street by 7. Yeah.
right. Yeah,
But I
that
also thought
happens
that
in others. I mean, that happened in West Hartford. Well, at the year that, Governor Dan Malloy and Secretary of the State Merrill were standing in line. The guy
mm,
hadn't shown up to their
oh my
polling place.
God, that's hilarious. The but again, that's separate from the issue of how the districts are drawn. I have a lot of sympathy for the Red Star
Hmm.
voters where they have to get dozens of people who are totally unnecessary. We went one year, Sherry, we went to Ward 30, which is divided in two.
Hmm.
And we went an hour of a report when the first human was going to show up to vote. You do not need two districts there. By 11 o'clock, there had been 7 wild turkeys walking by the polling place and 0 humans. We had 2 people by 2 p.m. Why did we need, so what would it take to get the legislature to move on that? What's the barrier? Is there just no incentive? People don't care enough to fix that? It's not as sexy as some other issues, but it seems like it's a bigger barrier as anything.
It's actually really interesting because the leadership, both Democrat and Republican, especially in the Senate, are not interested in moving on this, and
Is that because there's no partisan advantage at stake?
they have benefited from the way things are.
They
And
benefit from having truant schools split
well,
into a lot
no,
of
not
districts
that,
and
but
wild turkeys going to Ward 30 while 7 people wait around.
no, not so much. Although that would be a good question for Senator Looney, because at a recent League of Women Voters forum that was held at Yale Law School, both he and Senator Fasano, North Haven, East Haven, and Wallingford, said, I don't think it's so bad. I mean, our redistricting committee is bipartisan, and it seems to be working pretty well. So, but that's the state level, and that's their response to how it works for the drawing of the lines for state senate and house, not so much at a city level. And so getting some interest at a city level here or other cities and towns really has to do, I think, with the chief executives of each of those places.
All right, we're talking to Sherry Quickmeyer about how to keep our elections and our government accountable, which is her full-time job as executive
True.
director of Connecticut Common Cause. So, we were just talking about they call it goo-goo issues,
It's
or
true.
kind of wonk hats. Like, why doesn't anyone care that we're carve up all these districts where no one comes to vote? We got to spend all this money on poll workers and the elections don't work right. How long have you been involved in goo-goo work?
Probably about 20 years.
And did you grow up around here?
And I grew up mostly in the northwestern part of the state, but I've lived in this area for most of my adult life.
And what got you started in this kind of activism?
Well, when I first came to New Haven, I was working with folks who were homeless, folks who were on state assistance, and
For what organization?
for Christian Community Action.
That's where I think I first met you. Okay.
And it became clear working with Mothers for Justice, which was my role.
I love that group.
It's a great group. Great group. It became clear that what was happening for folks in terms of housing, in terms of assistance, in terms of finding employment, there were issues that needed to be addressed at a state level. And so I started organizing folks to go up and talk to their
I remember that.
legislators
They were awesome.
at the Capitol. Thank you. At the Capitol, and to speak with people in their home districts. And that was probably my first foray into.
Do you remember Natasha Ray,
influence.
who was one of the first people? Now she's a longtime program manager at the
I
Community
know.
Foundation.
She's
She's awesome.
amazing.
Yeah. So that guy, and then where did you gravitate from there?
I did a little policy analysis work for Connecticut Association for Human Services, and then I worked on some political campaigns, which I no longer do as in my role at Common Cause. And then I got involved with Common Cause.
All right, Fred Wertheimer, was he the national president?
He was one of the national presidents. There have been many, and Fred was he the first?
I don't remember. Just he was the face of it for a long
Yeah.
time. And
Yeah.
so, did you grow up with a kind of ethic of community service or political activism? What kind of household was it? How did you get this? How did you end up working for Christian Community in New Haven, organizing welfare moms?
I started there as a volunteer. Well, that's not. There were also years working in battered women's shelters here in New Haven and in 2 other towns, and with the Coalition Against Domestic Violence. But I started as a volunteer on a number of those
I mean, was that always your life
occasions.
trajectory? Did you grow up kind of active as a teenager in college, or?
Um, my family was not so much activist in the way that I've been, but my father was an organizer with the National Audubon Society for many years, and he ran a nature center before he started doing the organizing work. And my mother was a teacher, so of course that's all about organizing little kids.
And did
So
you, like when you were in college, what did you think you were going to be doing?
I thought I would be doing. I was actually I studied art and communications.
All right. And as we look forward, before I let you go, Sherry, as we look forward to our elections and trust in the system and participation in democracy, do you share the concerns that Nancy Pelosi and others have, including me, about whether in 2020, starting 2020, people are going to actually believe that election results are true and fair, whether hacking is going to endanger it, or whether if Donald Trump doesn't lose by a lot, he'll mobilize mass opposition to accepting the results?
I think we're in certain precarious times. I do, and I think you're right about the kind of mobilization that may happen if the current president loses in the next election. And I think it's important that Pelosi and her colleagues take some real leadership on passing legislation at a state level. I mean, at a national level, that addresses issues of gerrymandering, as you talked about, but also of issues of election reform and the kinds of things that that we're working on. I think it has to happen at the federal level as well as here. And I think that we need to do work to reverse the decline that happened in a number of the Supreme Court rulings.
Is it fair to say that what you spend your days doing is contributing to the effort to building faith and participation in our government and our democracy by making elections fairer and having more people take part?
That's very nice. Yes.
Okay, so Sherry Quickmeyer, Common Cause Connecticut Executive Director, thanks for filling us in on what you're up to.
Thank you.
Is there a way for people to get involved?
Folks can get involved through commoncause.org/CT or just commoncause.org. And if you're interested in automatic voter registration, now's the time to call your state senator and say, this is important. We need to be able to give more folks opportunities to participate in our electoral system.
All right. Well, Sherry Quickmeyer, thank you so much for coming by. I hope you'll come back and it won't be another 4 years. And I hope you have good news to tell us.
Yes, that would be great.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Thanks to the miracle man behind the controls here at Dateline New Haven, WNHH station manager, Harry Jaros. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience, performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night long here at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.